much better, Lauren. Thank you. It includes your au pair, if you have an au pair. If you have a family members that are undocumented that are staying with you because they just came to the United States and they are they haven't found their own place yet. They have nowhere else to live, and so therefore they live with you, and they should be counted on your census form. So these operational questions are trying to get at that and trying to make sure that you include everybody on your form. There is, again, no citizenship question, but we know that that's going to be a deterrent for some people because they think that there will be. Let's move to the next slide. So what do we use this stuff for? Yep. Oh, okay. Not talking about us. If you can remember to mute your phones, please. So once we add up all the people who live in America, what do we do with it? One of the biggest things we figure out is how many people belong in each congressional district. And there are 435 congressional districts in Congress. And the census really makes a difference for each individual state. Texas, for example, might gain 2 or 3 congressional seats this cycle. Florida might gain a couple, Texas, Arizona, Louisiana, New Mexico, Colorado, and Idaho. All of these places have seen migration or population booms in some way, one way, shape, or form. In the Northeast and along the northern Canadian border, Minnesota, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, all stand to lose congressional seats because their population has changed. So the shift of population has been towards the southern border and the western states. So we do expect that Congress will look very different in the year 2022 because we're going to move around where congressional seats are. When you add a congressional seat to a state like Colorado, which is where I live, you have to then reapportion where the lines are for your district. So redistricting will be a big thing in the news next year because all the census data will be used to redraw those district lines, which again is important because if you know how many people are in your population, the line being drawn one way or another can either disenfranchise you or give you political power. So it's important. One of the biggest reasons why the census matters to us is because of the distribution of federal states. So many programs are based in census, and a lot of people think that it's political, that the funding levels are just all political. It's not. LIHEAP formula, for example, the famous LIHEAP formula is based in census data. Government planning is also based in the census, federal, tribe, state, and local level. All of those things, the government looks at where population is growing to decide that they're going to put a new school or a new firehouse or allow a new hospital to break ground, or that they need to attract a hospital to a certain area because the population has grown. And organizational decisions for any of you who shop on Amazon, I'm sure many of you do. Amazon decided they were going to put a headquarters in New York, and they were going to put another one in Arlington, Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C. They used census data to make sure that they had a workforce that was robust enough to hire those positions, that the infrastructure was sound enough to have that kind of traffic. All of those things they thought about, but they used census data to do that. All of you use census data when you do your CNAs. So every 3 years, you folks look at your census numbers. And so if your census numbers for 2020 are off, that means that you are planning inappropriately, perhaps, for the next 3 years of services that your agency will offer. And the final thing that it does is enforce voting rights and civil rights legislation. This is one of the reasons they ask for race and Hispanic origin. It's to make sure that the people who need to be protected with their voting rights and civil rights are identified. We know where they are in the country. All right, next slide, please. So the census is upon us. Today is actually 4 weeks from this March 12th starting point. The official census, January 21st up in Alaska. There are some remote villages that can only be accessed when the ground freezes over. which is January, and it works out well because the tribes that live up there winter together. So this is the only time to really catch them before they go off to be hunters and to live a solitary life out in the wilderness. So the census started there in January, but for the rest of us, it starts on March 12th. So in that third week of March, people will start getting letters in the mail inviting them to respond online. They will have follow-up postcards in March 16th to April 3rd. So they're going to do this in waves. We are expecting that most of the people who self-respond will be doing self-response in the first 2 to 3 weeks of the census. So that's really March 12th until the first week of April. And that's really our chance to get people to find their forms and go online and spend the 10 minutes it's going to take to fill their census forms out. April 8th through 16th, the paper questionnaire will finally be sent. So this year is unique because they're pushing folks to fill out their census forms online. That is a very new thing. It's causing some concern with some people about IT security, but this is the way the census is going to be done this year. So they're hoping that 60% of respondents go online, fill out the form online, or they can call in this year. In previous years, there's always been a census hotline. This year, you can actually fill the form out over the phone. The phones will have people speaking 13 different languages. Online, they're going to have 59 different languages translated field guides. So links to both the list of languages that will be spoken and the 59 different field guides are on our census website, which we'll get to. At the end of April, final postcards will be sent, encouraging people to fill the form out on paper or go online or call in before they send a Census Bureau employee to the door. May 4th to July 24th is called the NARFU, the non-response follow-up visit, where census employees will literally knock door to door. They will come to your door up to 6 times to try to catch you, to remind you to fill out your census forms. They will leave something at your door every time they come, also to remind you to fill out your forms if you're not home. And then they're going to start asking your neighbors. So they'll knock on your neighbors' doors and say, hey, do you know who lives in 123? Can you tell them how many people there are and what their ages are? So the Census Bureau is pretty aggressive, shall we say, in making sure that you fill out the form. But the best thing for people to do is to fill it out when it first comes to their door and avoid all of it. All right, let's switch next slide, please. So I've already talked a little bit about this, but 95% of households will get their invitation by mail. Some of you live in really rural areas where there's no mail service or the mail service is a P.O. box. And the Census Bureau cannot legally deliver to a P.O. box. So those people will likely receive their invitation on their front porch. A census employee will just drop it off. 1% of households will be counted in person. So that includes that Alaska contingency. That also includes group quarters. So if you have a homeless shelter in your area, if you have a domestic violence shelter, if you have an assisted living facility, an old folks home, some kind of a situation like that, long-term rehab, or college dormitories, all of those group quarters will be counted by the administration of those facilities, which is nice. It means that you don't have to worry about those in your neighborhood. But if you have a college and some people live off campus, all of those people will receive invitations as if they were just another household. So that is something to keep in mind. They are estimating right now that 40% of households will require in-person follow-up, which is a huge number. There are lots of reasons that I'm about to go over, but it's a big number and it's a daunting task. Next slide, please. So if you're curious about how your area will get your invitations, CUNY is the City University of New York. They've received a pot of money to do these amazing maps. They go down to census tract, so you can put in your zip code and you can get information about how your area will get their map, will get their forms. They recognize that some areas, for example, a lot of Hispanic populations aren't going to fill the form out online or over the phone. They would much rather use the paper form. So those areas might get paper invitations far before that third mailing goes out. But the CMN map will show you how your area will get your invitations. The CMN maps also show why areas are hard to count. So it's either they have a rural district and they don't have a lot of internet, which is an anticipation for it to being difficult for people to go online and fill out their forms, or it could be that they have a high Spanish-speaking area, and so there might be a language barrier. So the maps show which areas have those issues. And I sat in on a webinar yesterday about how the census will be counting in real time. So the CUNY folks are going to overlay the information that's going to come out from the Census Bureau. In the first 3 weeks, it's going to be daily. So they can pinpoint where in the country response rates are lagging, and they can know that this area needs a little bit more attention than that area. To that end, the Census Bureau will have something called mobile questionnaire assistance centers. So think vans equipped with laptops and a couple of Census Bureau employees. And they are going to target the low response areas throughout the country to see if they can boost response rates in those areas. So if any of you have a fair coming up or some kind of a gathering, or know that this mega church in your area has thousands of people, that a mobile assistance center could come and hang out in the parking lot for people to come out of church, that's something that we can submit to the Census Bureau in order to have those folks come in, hopefully, and help you reduce your undercount. I've got a question, so I'm going to take a break and answer this. If you have a post office box, can you apply online before a numerator comes to your house? Yes, for sure. You can certainly go online. We got the URL a couple days ago.
It's my2020census.gov.
Lauren, can you push that out to everybody on the call, please, in the chat? We'll publicize that as well. But sure, if you have a post office box, or if you don't get an invitation at all, you can still go online and fill out that form. You can still call in and you can fill out the form online. The one thing you can't do is get a paper form. They will not be giving out paper forms at all, except for that, the third mailing. So thank you for the question. I appreciate it. So the CUNY maps will have real-time results, so you can see if your area is performing as expected, or lower than expected, or above average, to see if you can redouble your efforts and/or call in the Census Bureau to give you assistance. All right, next page. I'm going to start speeding through some of this stuff because I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. The Census Bureau is going to hire 500,000 people. That's the goal. Right now, we are very worried that they will not be able to hit that quota. The hiring process has been very difficult. It is confusing. I'm part of a lot of Facebook groups for people who are working for the census or trying to work for the census, or they're recruiters. And one of the most common things is that people don't answer their phones, which in the day and age of spam calls, it makes a lot of sense. Why would you answer an unknown number? But the process is you apply online, and then once the Census Bureau accepts your application and they want to hire you, they call you. They only call you 3 times. So if you don't answer your phone any of those 3 times, you go back to the bottom of the pile. It's been really frustrating work to try to get people hired, and it's been frustrating for people who are applying because they haven't been called, except that they have been. So if you have anybody that wants to be a census enumerator, I think I have the link somewhere else in the slide deck. But tell people to be patient and to answer every phone call as they come in, because that's how you get your census job. And there are some people who might not want to knock doors, but they can still work for the census. So if you do get that phone call that says, "Do you want to work for us?" you just say yes, and then they send you your background information. It's about a Head Start equivalent background check, and you go through the fingerprinting process, the whole 9 yards. And then when you start to do training, that's when they figure out where you belong. And that's when you can say, "I have a huge phobia of dogs and I don't want to knock doors. I would rather be in the back office." And they'll find a way to make it work for you. But $15 billion is what they're going to spend on this effort. They've spent about half of it already. There's been a big fight in Congress about how much money will be apportioned to the census. One side says we're pushing everything online, so it should be less expensive. The other side says, well, the citizenship question has a lot of people very afraid and very confused. And the online response system is new and could provide a lot of challenges in its own right, so we still need the full allotment. So they're still sussing that out in Congress. I think that we've been mostly funded, but we're still waiting to see the final. In 1970, it cost about $16 a household to count. And in today's dollar, well, these are all today's dollars. Today, it's expected to be about $107 per household. Every person that's counted is equal to about $2,000 in funding for your community a year. And that's every year for 10 years, because we won't do another census until 2030. So if you miss 10 people in your community, you've just missed $20,000 a year, but that's 10 years, so you've really missed $200,000. And if you miss 10 people, you're probably going to miss a few more. There's a county in Idaho that figured out that they somehow missed 31,500 people, and they calculated it out, and it turned into $46 million that their county missed alone. So the impact is really big. It's huge. I've got a question, and thank you for sending the questions. I appreciate it. Starting March 12th, you can go online. Yes, starting March 12th, you can go online and fill out the form. And if you go to my2020census.gov right now, it will tell you that. So that's good. I was really nervous about the online option until my household got the American Community Survey, and we filled it out online, and it was okay. It was an easy, straightforward process. Now, we happen to have computers, and a lot of people that we serve have cell phones. That's their access. It will work on a cell phone, but it's a tiny little box, and it makes it a little bit harder. All right, next slide, please. So how do we go from $16 in 1970 to $107 today? The environment is really challenging. First of all, we have a mobile population. For us, our populations are even more mobile than the average. So in America, the statistic is that 14 to 18% of Americans move every year. But if you think about it, most people probably only move once a year. You know, you pick up, you move across town, you upgrade your house because you have a new baby, you downgrade your house because you're an empty nester, but you move once. Whereas in our communities, people often move 2 or 3 or 4 times, right? You lose your job, so you get evicted. You crash with a family friend for a couple of weeks, but then they get sick and tired of you, so you move on to your sister's couch, and then you end up in a hotel for a couple of days, or a motel, as the case may be. So people in our communities move a lot more often than the national average, which means that people are harder to find to mail them paper forms and paper invitations. So the people who are mobile and who don't have a steady address, especially people crashing in motels, it's really important to reach them, to push them to call in or to go online to fill out their forms. I've talked about the constrained fiscal environment. That's Congress fighting about how much money to spend on the census. Rapidly changing use of technology and information explosion go hand in hand. We all carry little mini computers in our hands, right? These things, they ding, they beep, they flash, they buzz. You have Twitter, you have Snapchat, you have Facebook, you have more than one email account, you have news alerts. I have earthquake warnings on my phone from our time in Puerto Rico. So we have a little bit of everything going on here. So it's really hard to cut through that clutter. Also, people don't check their mailboxes as often as they did or as carefully as they did. Because if something important is happening, you get an email about it, right? You also have companies like Lending Club or Lending Tree or whatever it is, taking the census forms and mimicking the envelope look and feel. So people see these things, and even though it's an official federal document, it looks like trash. It looks like spam mail, so they throw it out. So all of that is working against us. There's a decline in response rates, in part because of all of these things, but also because of a distrust in government. Today's political environment is working against us quite a bit. There's animosity on both sides. People are at each other's throats. And the government is getting a brunt of it, right? They don't trust the government anymore. And that especially impacts all of you because you work for the government. We also have an increasingly diverse population. We have immigrants, we have migrants, we have a multicultural heritage. You could stay, it's okay. So that's all complicating matters because if you have a migrant population who wouldn't have filled out a census in their home country because it didn't exist, and they would never have trusted their home government to tell them the information about their families, they're not going to come to the United States and do that, right? So there's a culture barrier there. We also have a lot of informal complex living arrangements, and this goes to the couch surfer. This goes to the grandparents taking care of a grandchild. This goes to group houses. You have a college house off campus that houses 6 different guys. All of that is on the rise in America, which makes it a far more difficult environment to get the message out, to get people counted. Next slide. So the Census Bureau has identified these categories as people who are, quote, hard to count. I don't love the term hard to count because I think that people who we serve are often told they're difficult in a lot of ways and for a lot of reasons. So I would prefer the term undercount. But if you look at this, it's a who's who of who walks in our doors every day. You have Native Americans and low-income people. You have people with disabilities. You have people who are frequent movers, large households, and there's a variety of reasons for that. People of color and senior citizens. All of these people are harder to reach than other people, and it's more difficult to convince them to fill this form out than other people. And all that ends up doing is disenfranchising them because they don't get the political representation they deserve on a state level, on a local level, on the federal level, and they certainly don't get the financial resources that the federal government should give to their communities. Next slide. Last slide about why people are difficult to reach. People can be hard to locate, movers, people in new housing, people who are trying to stay hidden. They can be hard to persuade to fill out forms. Lots of undocumented people who live in this country. There's a lot of misinformation, specifically around the citizenship question. They can be hard to interview, so they can have low language or low literacy, they have language barriers. They could have no internet and be in a really rural district or unreliable mail for a variety of reasons. Or they can be hard to contact, homeless and transient communities mostly. Next slide. Or they could be one of all 4. We are asking that everybody help the census hire those 500,000 people. I'm very concerned that we are not going to get the number that we need, and that the non-response follow-up visit portion of the census activities are going to be really difficult. Here are 2 links to the job and pay rates. It's between $13 and $27 an hour, depending on where you are in the country. And everybody gets a 58-cent mileage reimbursement if you end up driving. And the second link, it goes straight to what jobs are available in your area. And again, if you're interested in applying yourself or to encourage your customers or clients to go and do this, it is part-time work or full-time work, depending on your schedule. And they're very flexible. So even if you only have 5 to 10 hours a week, the busiest period is March 12th through July. And it kicks up in May and gets a little bit busier. Next slide. And I'm going to answer some questions while we do this. Somebody asked if people use their names or just a number of people in the household. Yes, they do ask for names. If any of you do genealogy research, 2022 is the next release year. So in 2022, the form my grandfather filled out for my mom and my uncle, my aunt, and my grandmother will be available to the public. So it takes 72 years for them to release that. And I'm excited to see it because I'm a nerd. So I can see my grandfather's handwriting and see my mom's name written there. So they do ask for name and they do ask for date of birth. Okay, so why is community action involved in the census? First of all, we have been since 1970. So the first chance we had to be involved in this since our inception, we jumped at the opportunity. Back then, Gym Masters will tell you that they had paper forms just sitting on the desks, and you could just hand out a paper form for everybody that came in the door. No longer the case, but we have a history of being involved because we know that it impacts our community. And those hardest to count folks, the most undercounted populations, walk through our doors every day. So for us, it's a natural fit that we have the ability to talk to people about why the census is important and encourage them to fill out the census form to better their community as a whole. We are those trusted messengers. So we can tell them the Census Bureau's tagline is safe, easy, and important. And the populations we serve are most often the undercounted folks, and our communities then miss out on our fair share of dollars in representation. Next slide. I got a question. We will be sending these slides around. You are more than welcome to slice and dice and steal. It's not stealing. I'm giving it to you freely. We are also putting out a short staff deck. So if you have a staff meeting and you have 10 or 15 minutes, you can run through a quick slide deck with your staff members. And if you have boards, we also have a board deck that we're publishing shortly. So hopefully that will be very helpful for all of you. And if you need something else, please ask us. We are more than happy to create things for you. Okay, so just a reiteration while I check to make sure, okay, I did get all the questions. The census drives all of these dollars. So CSBG, which I know all of us get, that's based in part on population numbers. LIHEAP, which I know a lot of us do, that formula is based in census numbers. Head Start, TANF, rural rental assistance programs, aging programs, child and adult food care programs. All of those dollars are somehow based in actual population numbers. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to go through the next slide, and then we're going to open it up for questions and a brief conversation if people are interested. So why public CAAs? LA, you handle populations just like private CAAs. Census funding directly affects your agencies. You have a lot to lose. So again, all of that federal funding that comes to our programs, it impacts you just as much as it might otherwise. Kids from 0 to 4 is the most undercounted group across the country, and 5 to 9 is the second group. And so I know a lot of you handle kids every day or families with children. If we convince parents to fill out the census form and include their children, they will also include themselves. It's a very weird phenomenon that parents will often fill the census form out for themselves and miss their children. Either they think that the government doesn't need to know about my family or my kids. But if any of you encourage people to use the Earned Income Tax Credit, guess what? They're already telling the government about their kids. So it's a far more, it's an easy tie to make if you've got a TANF form that they've just figured out with you, and you say, all right, we've got one more form that'd be really great for us to fill out now. Do you want to fill out your census? And then sit with somebody on a computer or set them up on a bank of computers where they can do the survey online, or they can call into the 1-800 numbers right then and there and just finish it up. There's a tie there that we're hoping you'll use to encourage people to fill it out. Government employees are trusted to help with government forms. We are professional form fillers in a lot of ways. One thing, and there's a slide about this later, but the one thing we can't do is if we know that Joe Smith is never going to fill out his census form, but you know, I have a database with all of Joe's family information, I could fill the form out for him just to make sure we get him counted. Obviously, you can't do that. Just the same as you could never fill out a TANF form for somebody without their knowledge. It's the same thing. And we recognize that distrust of the government might filter down to you. And we're hoping that because we have trusted messenger status, because people really come to us when they need help the most, that'll extend into the census. Do we want to have a quick conversation? Do people have questions that you can unmute yourself and ask if you haven't put something in the chat box? Nobody wants to listen to me for a full hour. So I did get a question, this can be offered at the same time as applying for assistance to community action. Yes, once March 12th rolls around, anybody that walks in your doors, you can say, hey, did you fill out your census form? And if they say no, you can, if you have a bank of computers or a tablet, 2 computers, you can have them go over to the side and fill it out, or you can have dial the phone for them right then and there and have them do it online. So we're hoping that you will take the initiative to make that connection and say, you filled out this form. It'd be really great if you could also fill out your census form. It benefits our community. Lauren, do you have any questions that people have asked? What if they need help? Can we help them? Yes, you can help them. You cannot fill the form out for them. And I know that that's splicing hairs in some ways. But like I said, if Joe Smith is never going to do it, you can't just go online and fill it out for him. But you can certainly help people the same way you would help them with any other form that they ask for help with. Any other questions? Lauren, do you have any?
I hadn't any come through.
Okay. People have been sending them to me, which I appreciate, so keep it up. Okay, so I think we'll move to the next slide, but please continue to ask questions. So I think I've outlined the problem, right? We have this major effort being undertaken in our country. We have a lot of people who might be scared or nervous or not understand the impact. So what's being done to counteract those efforts? The Census Bureau, first of all, the census understands how hard this is. This is what they do. So they have a lot of programs in place to help mitigate some of the undercounts. They're about to start, actually they went live already with their ad campaign. So they have radio ads out there, they have TV ads out there, they have Facebook ads, they're doing online activation stuff to try to get the word out, which is helpful. We have partnered with the census I think that there was Dillingham is the gentleman who runs the Census Bureau. He was on Capitol Hill yesterday, and he said they have 2,000 partnerships with entities across the country who are pushing census work, and we're one of them. So we work with them across the country. There are people called partnership specialists, and I have 5 or 6 that I'm in regular contact with, asking them specific questions and pushing them to reach out to or to contact agencies around the country to help make sure that people have information and resources that they need. And I mentioned the mobile assistance program. If there's an event coming up that you would like a mobile assistance center to come to, the best way to get that on the Census Bureau's radar is through the partnership specialist. They have been having trouble keeping partnership specialists employed and hiring new ones because of all of the infrastructure issues around hiring. But there are ways to do it. And if you have issues with it, tell me and I can try to help. So we have partnered. We do encourage that you go online and partner with them as well in an individual way. You can sign up for their ever interesting emails. They send out a few times a week. I get an email, and it's fascinating stuff about how they use census data. So they use it to calculate the average age a woman has her first child in 1950. And then they'll do that again with the 2020 set and see where it changed and how it changed. So it's a statistical snapshot of America, which I find really interesting, which reminds me that I didn't talk about Census Day, which I should do. April 1st is actually Census Day. And the importance is that whenever you fill your form out, be it March 12th or the last day of July, which is the last day to do it, you always fill the form out as if it were April 1st. So you think about who's going to be living in my house on April 1st or who was living in my house on April 1st. This prevents us from duplicate counts because if somebody moves in with their girlfriend on April 5th, and so then they fill out the form on April 5th as if they lived there, but their parents counted them in their old house, then it's a duplicate record. So they do this snapshot. So whenever you fill that form out, you think about April 1st is the day that they're asking about. Sorry, I forgot that earlier. I skipped it so intentionally. Okay, so next slide. This is a map of regional offices, and we can insert, before we mail this out, I think we can insert the individual locations. So each of these regions has a regional office. So there are LA, Denver, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, and Atlanta. So wherever you are in the country, you have a regional office. And those are the people that you would email to say, I'm looking for my local partnership specialist in order to get information and pamphlets and swag from the Census Bureau, or to invite the partnership specialist to a meeting to talk to a crowd, or to tell them about an event that a mobile assistance center should come to. The mobile assistance center is called Mobile Questionnaire Assistance, MQA. So that was a question that just came through. So that's one way to do that, and we can send out the individual regions. Or if you're interested, we can also maybe connect you to someone we know is working in your area, because we do have some of that information. We're going to go to the next slide. And I have another question. This is a good one. Can you discuss the best advice for incarcerated individuals who may be receiving services as part of a work release program? Should they be filling out the census individually, or are they counted as part of a household? I think it depends. If they are in a halfway house, my guess is that the halfway house will be considered a group quarter, and that the administrator of that halfway house will count them. If they are living at home, even though that they are an incarcerated individual, they should be counted as part of the household. Whenever something like that is a question, I would always recommend that you overcount rather than undercount. I'm not saying make up people in your household, but I'm saying if you have a question about your college kid who's away at college living off campus, it's better to put that college kid on the form and have the Census Bureau dedupe than it is for you to leave that kid off and have your kid not fill out his form when it arrives in the mailbox, and then to have that kid not be counted. And the same thing with a grandchild being taken care of by a grandparent. Grandmother might not know if mom and dad will put that kid on the census form. It's better for everybody to count that child, because the Census Bureau will dedupe, but they cannot make information that they don't have already. Does that make sense? So in somebody who's incarcerated, if they're in jail and they are living in the jail, they will be counted in the county where that jail is housed, which is a huge disenfranchisement for a lot of populations, which is another issue that I'm happy to discuss offline. But if they're living at home and they're on a work release program, or they're housebound, or whatever the situation is, they should be counted in that household. And it's always better to overcount than undercount. I hope that that clears that up. All right, so complete count committees. This is one of my favorite programs that the census has. It's kind of a tripartite board, which makes it even more close to my heart. They have statewide complete count committees, and so most of the states in the country have an overall complete count committee where power brokers and people, elected officials, usually the governor appoints people who are big in the nonprofit world, big in the business world, and high government officials to talk about how the state is going to implement a plan to count the state. They're also doing that on the local level. And so the link in this PowerPoint takes you to a map of local complete count committees. And so it could be, I know like Knoxville, Tennessee has a complete count committee. The mayor's on it. Our Community Action Agency Association is on it, a variety of local businesses. And when they meet, they talk about how they're going to count their population and who's going to do what and how they can partner and not duplicate efforts, but instead magnify efforts. So there is likely a complete count committee near you. And if there isn't, you could be so bold as to create your own. If you would like to do that, a partnership specialist from the Census Bureau can pretty much do it for you. They have a manual and they can help you do most of the legwork on how to do that, especially if you have a list of people that should be on that committee. What I like about it, though, is that it's local level. So it's people in your community realizing, oh, we need to get Mama Lisa on board because everybody knows and reveres her in the community. And if she talks about the census, people will listen. Or Yellow Pine, Idaho, that has 200 people and they have, none of them really like outsiders. The postal employees are the ones that bring them food from the food pantry. because the closest CAA is 200 miles away. But everybody goes to the bar. And so engaging that bartender, if a complete count committee would go and talk to a bartender about the importance of the census and have that person be a census evangelist for every patron that comes in the door, that's a great way to reach that community so they know that this is an important thing for them to do. So we encourage people to take a look at where those are and see who else might be doing work to fill out, to eradicate the undercount, to get people counted in your area. Next slide. Okay, we are also not doing this alone. So Census Counts 2020 Coalition, the next slide actually has a list of who we all are. They have funded 25 or 30 entities cross-section of America, thank you, to make sure that different voices are being heard across the country, magnifying the message that the census is safe and important and easy. If you go to censuscounts.org, you'll find all kinds of resources. One of the links later is their toolkits from all of these agencies and entities. But it is a smattering of the who's who of the American nonprofit world, and it's been a real pleasure to work with them. These people are resources for us. It's not unlike a complete count committee for us. We are working in tandem to make sure that we're not being duplicative in our efforts. And when I need a fact sheet in Creole, I know that I can go to this group and find a fact sheet in Creole that is not just what the Census Bureau has put out. NALEO is the National Association for Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, and in conjunction with the Leadership Conference Education Fund, the two of them have been going out and doing Train the Trainer full-day sessions across the country. And I think that the Coalition on Human Needs and we will be doing some of those in tandem. But between all of us, if you have people who have disabilities and you're worried about Braille, you can reach out to the National Disability Rights, you can look at their toolkit to see how to handle that scenario, or you can reach out to us if you have specific questions, and I have these resources at my fingertips so we can get answers for folks that I might not know. Next slide. So the two ways to engage with these partners is to find your partnership specialist, and you can check this list of state leads and hubs. It's a list of people who are doing census work throughout the country. So you might be able to answer your own question and find somebody who's working locally with you. It could be that you would love to engage, but you're strapped and busy and totally stressed, which I totally believe. But if you reach out to somebody who's doing work in your area, you could invite them to a meeting, or you can invite them to see what they're doing and see how you can plug in and say, I'm interested in census work, but I don't have the bandwidth. How can we partner? So this list of state leads and hubs could be very interesting for you. Next slide. All right, so what are we doing as the partnership? We spent the first 6 months of this project educating and increasing awareness. So raising the alarm, the census is coming. And we're hoping to mobilize all of our agencies to do something around the census. We have curated and generated resources that are community action specific. It would be physically impossible for anyone to read all of the census materials that are out there. You don't have to. We have done that for you as much as a 4-person team can do. But we're also making posters that are community action specific and fact sheets that specifically call out funding for LIHEAP and for SNAP and WIC. We've pulled together toolkits, specifically one for VITA. We're about to publish an entire census toolkit, so you have everything you need at your fingertips. Our goal is to make it easy for you to do census work in between your other work. We recognize that not everyone's going to be able to hold a census party on April 1st and offer pizza to people who come and fill out the census forms on Computer Bank. That might be unattainable for some of you. But if you can slip it into your everyday meetings, spending a minute or two with each customer, just mentioning the census and encouraging them to fill it out, we could have a huge impact. We also have a 10-member working group that involves most of the hardest to count population states, the hardest to count population states. So they're doing work in their own states to push census activities, and they're also my guidance board. Next slide. This is the website where we're putting all of our resources. So communityactionpartnership.com/census-2020. That's where we're putting all of our resources. So it's a good place for you to go and peruse. And again, if something's missing, if there's something that would be very helpful for you, let us know. We can create that for you. Next slide. I really love complete count committees. So we also have a community action complete count committee. Right now we have about 425 members. We really want one person from all 1,000 agencies just to receive information, just so they know what's going on and can be the advocate for census work and finding a way to make it easy for your agency in particular. So we're really hoping that people will go to the partnership website and nominate somebody for complete count committee if you haven't already. We're doing a kickoff on Wednesday for that. So it's going to be an hour-long. The census is 3 weeks away. What do we do? Kind of a push. So we hope folks can sign up before then and join us for that. Next slide. We also have a Moodle Academy. Excuse me. Right now there's an individual census track. We're finishing up the second one. In less than 2 hours, you can go through at your own pace and do the modules and get the information you need to answer frequently asked questions. Next slide. I've already mentioned most of this. We really want to make it easy for you to just tack this on as you do other work. Posters, buttons, and one-pager fact sheets. I have a printing budget, so we are printing materials for agencies. So if you would like buttons that say, ask me about the census, or count me in, or cuento conmigo, and I think we're going to do one that says, preguntarle, so Spanish, ask me about the census, we will send you posters and buttons and fact sheets. So you should email me or Lauren to make that request. And if there's something that would be helpful for you, we have a graphic design budget. We have graphic design people who are amazing, like Lauren, on staff. So we encourage you to ask us, because if you need it, somebody else does too. And we might be able to create something for you and then print it at a local printer or send it through staples.com and have it delivered. So don't let budgets stop you from participating, because we can help with that. All right, I'm going to try to fly through the next few slides because I want to get to some questions. What can you do? The right messaging is key. We are going to send this PowerPoint out, and it has these slides, and so I encourage you to go through them and take a look at the slides that are relevant for your populations. But we have some messaging research in a few slides. Let's go to the next slide. We have some training tools, these videos. The upper left-hand corner is a 7-minute video of frequently asked questions. And then the others, there are 10. 2 of them are bilingual. Well, there are 12, but 2 of them are in English and in Spanish. And they talk about different scenarios and how the census is easy and how kids are important to count and all those sorts of things. So you can share them on Facebook. You can put them on your CCTV if you have a lobby. All of those sorts of things, they're available for you to use as a resource. Next page. So I wanted to do a Q&A and have a conversation, but these are some things that you can think about, and these are some things that would be great for a staff exercise, to have an overview of the census and then have a conversation about how to go through these common things that people balk at. Next slide. So these are the messaging things that I was talking about. I think everyone can go through them on their own, but next slide shows the most popular message. Yeah, this is the most popular message, is to convince parents to put their kids on their form. Counting children means more funding for schools. It was 82% of people who weren't planning to put their kids on the census forms after this message decided to. This is one reason why our schools are underfunded around the country, is because 0 to 4 and 5 to 9 are 2 of the most commonly undercounted groups. If we don't know the kids exist, we can't send the education funding to those school systems. Schools, childcare, housing, and transportation programs, all of that also moved 82% from not filling out the census with their kids to filling out the census with their kids. And the final message for kids that was really resonating, every 10 years. So if you miss a 3-month-old baby, you have just missed their entire elementary school education. You missed their childhood, and they're not going to get the money for the for the programs that help them thrive and succeed in life. So that moves 81% of folks. Next. African American communities, these slides talk about how we really need to target African Americans under 35, and that telling them that the census impacts their community is really helpful. Thinking the government has other ways to obtain that information is true. Leave it there, it's okay. It's true that the government does have other ways, but if it doesn't happen on the census form, it's not official, and so it doesn't matter. So even if the government can get that information from other places, it doesn't matter unless you fill out your form. Ensuring funding programs for my community. Community is really important to all of our customers. If you mention that the census will help infuse their community with funding, it's very, very helpful message that moves people quickly. Next slide. Hispanic communities, they're more likely to fill out paper forms than anything else. So it might be that third mailing at the end of April that has the paper form might be a good chance for all of us to do pushes for Hispanic communities. Telling them about the safety and security measures that the census has in place, which I'm going to go over in a minute, is really, really helpful because most people are afraid that they're going to get deported, their family members will be deported, they'll lose the citizenship that they've recently acquired. All of those things are really big fears. So there are ways to mitigate that. Next slide shows some of those, right? Yeah, convenient, safe, and required. It is also required by law to do the census, and most, even undocumented immigrants, fill out their tax forms. So if they do their tax forms, they also need to do a census form. So VITA programs out there, if we can have your VITA preparers pushing census, it's really helpful. Next slide. I know I'm going through these quickly, but I'm watching the clock, and I know people have other things to do. Next slide. Asian Americans, it's also community. Next slide. Skip a bunch of slides until I want to get through the messaging because people can look at them themselves. Sorry, I talk too much, huh? Native American communities, for any of you who are doing travel work, they have no reason to trust the federal government. So anything we can do to encourage those populations specifically. The idea that they don't want to be erased is very popular. It really helps move people. If my civic duty is most compelling, my community needs resources and government programs, also very compelling. Next slide. So common questions. Do I participate if I'm not a citizen? Yes, everybody who lives in the United States is counted. Asylum seekers, au pairs, diplomats, undocumented immigrants, citizens, everybody. Next slide. Do they come to my house? They're less likely to come to your house if you fill out the form completely and fill it out early. So I can't guarantee that somebody won't come to your door if you fill out the census form because there's, they might do quality assurance, they might have a question that they need to follow up, or they might be doing another community survey, the American Community Survey. So I can't guarantee it, but I will say that if you've got people who don't want government employees on their doorstep, fill the census out early, fill it out completely, and you're less likely to have somebody. Next question. I also have a question on chat. Is there a response other than male, female for gender? No, there isn't. My guess is that 2030 they will have a non-binary and or transgender option, but right now it is just male, female. And I would encourage anybody who is gender fluid to pick the one they most identify with. It's less than perfect, but it is the way it is. So thank you for asking that question. Is it safe? I'm going to spend a minute, and I know we're over, so I'm going to spend a quick minute talking about safety. The federal law prohibits the Census Bureau from disseminating any of this information at all. Period, full stop. It can only be used by the Census Bureau for statistical purposes. In fact, they do a lot of work to hide some demographic information. So if you've got 10 people living in a county, you can't go and figure out how those people responded. Called something differentiation, information differentiation. So they're cognizant of that, and they try to make it safe and protect people's answers. Census information cannot be disclosed for 72 years, which is why 2022 is when the 1950 responses will be released. So if you've got someone in Section 8 housing who doesn't want to fill the form out because they don't want to put that they have 8 people living in a house meant for 6, their landlord will never know. No one will ever know until 2092. 2092 is when that form will be released, and by then the landlord will be dead. So there's a safety precaution built in there. Census Bureau staff also they pledge something called Title 13. So they take an oath of office when they first start that says they will not reveal private information that they learn on the job forever. And if they do, they can be jailed for 5 years and they can be fined up to $250,000, which is a huge deterrent for people. It's just, one guy said, my family lives in my house. If I do this, I'll be in jail. My family will lose the house, and it will be for what? It's not worth it to me. So it's a very strong precaution. It came about in the 70s in response to other things that the Census Bureau had done prior that they weren't really excited about. So they wanted to make protections solid. Next slide. Can I help someone? We already talked about this a little bit. You help people fill forms out all the time. So yes, you cannot fill out the forms for them. And there's been some disagreement. I've had 3 partnership specialists say, please help people fill their forms out. I have had one person say, you aren't sworn Census Bureau employees, so no, you can't do that. We fill out forms all the time. We have access to this information. If somebody says, please help me, I have no problems whatsoever with people doing that. And there's always the option of dialing the phone for them or setting up the computer for them and going to the right site so they can fill out their information. Next slide. Accessibility issues we talked about. Online is one way. The phone lines, I think, will be the unsung hero of 2020 census. But if you have got somebody with language problems, language barriers, or somebody who's blind, they can call in. And okay, next slide. Yep, that's enough. We have social media campaigns. We encourage you to spread our memes and messages on your Facebook pages and Instagram and Twitter in any way you engage with your populations. We also encourage you to sign up for our census newsletter. We also have a census engagement group on Facebook that you can find going to the National Community Action Partnership Facebook group. It's the only group there where people talk about census things, people post things that are interesting and ask questions. We encourage you to engage. If any of you would like to do a one-on-one appointment with me, Lauren, can you find the calendar URL and put it in the box? We can sit and talk about your specific agency and what might work best for you. So we're scheduling those out for the next month. Just a 15 or 20-minute call might really help you figure out which resources you should focus on, try to make it easy for you. All right, that's more or less it. So if anybody has additional questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can put it into the chat box. Thank you. I hope that, I know more about this than I should, so I appreciate that. If anybody wants to just call and talk census, I'm also open to that. Maybe in August. Okay, well, these are our email addresses, so feel free to hit any of us up with additional questions. I think many of you know Lil and Jim and Alan, and now you've met Lauren and me, so please feel free to ask us anything that you have on your mind about the census, because we know a lot, and we are more than happy to be here to help. So with that, only 5 minutes late, I'm pretty proud of that. Thank you everyone for joining us. We will send this out with notes and the slide deck and links in the next day or two.